Oh, great, another to be continued. If I had a comic, I'd never end it like that.
Last week, Netflix tweeted that a brand new Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon would debut on the service in 2022. And my first thought was, why did they immediately delete the tweet without any explanation? Why did they do that?
I wonder what happened to Sonic.
My second thought was to actually read the 3 things that we know about it. It's going to have 3 Ds and be produced by WildBrain and Man of Action. WildBrain Studios makes sense because they specialize in making shows out of big international media properties like Johnny Test and currently distribute the 90s Sonic cartoons made by Deke. They are doing a bang-up job at that. Man of Action Entertainment seems like a good pick considering their backlog, but nowadays they work on up to 4 different cartoons at once, some of which are almost interchangeable with their cash cow, Ben 10. This same collaboration brought us Mega Man Fully Charged, which I found some enjoyment in, even if it was fairly run-of-the-mill despite some surprising fan service. Like, there's a whole episode about the infamous bad box art Mega Man, but it was doomed by only being available on the Cartoon Network app, so it only got 1 season. 3D CGI animation isn't ideal for a franchise known for its expansive cast and loads of detailed locations, since modeling new assets takes a lot of time, money, and talent. I wonder how expansive the scope will be, unless they want to go the Sonic Boom route.
Just think of all the hundreds more stories to be told using the same 8 characters and 4 locations. The possibilities are limitless.
From the promise of CGI and this image of modern Sonic, neither of which may be finalized yet, I get the feeling that this cartoon might be heavily inspired by the current mainline games. And who knows how willing Sega is to launch a brand new sub-series of the franchise nowadays. But after a movie with jokes about Dr. Eggman being breastfed became one of the highest-grossing films of 2020, anything's fair game.
I was spitting out formulas while you were still spitting up formula.
I was breastfed, actually.
Nice.
Now, Sonic comics are my personal favorite internet rabbit hole, and I'd love to dive into my personal theory that former writer Ken Penders is the real-life version of Ned Flanders, if he loved his original characters as much as Ned loves God. However, now is not the time for that. Instead, I'm going to cover 5 different aspects of the recent IDW line that I think the upcoming cartoon should take influence from. Generally, I don't think it's the best or most interesting of the Hedgehog's printed adventures, but it's by far the most consistent and similar to the games. If you want to know what these comics are all about, which I won't spoil here, you can pick up the collected volumes for relatively cheap, or watch the Game Apologist Sonic Speed Reading series, where he recaps the book. I highly recommend that, but you're not going to abandon this video to watch those, right?
Oh, crap.
I think anyone can jump into this comic with little knowledge of Sonic or his history, but it isn't completely alienating to longtime fans either. It uses the aftermath of Sonic Forces as an excuse to have Sonic travel around his world to slowly reintroduce the core cast from the modern games. There's brief flashbacks and explanations to keep newcomers from being confused, but also plenty of callbacks and no drawn-out adaptations that take away from original stories. Now, Sonic Forces had a lot of odd characterizations and gameplay elements that were unexplained by its plot, and IDW Sonic works with or around them. The same goes for the creative team being limited to modern game concepts only, as Sega was heavily involved with the direction of the story. This is no surprise, as literally every licensed piece of media has some kind of wacky mandates from the license holders. But here, it blocks off a lot of great material from classic Sonic and previous adaptations from being used. I assume that this Netflix series will be no different. Here, this problem is frequently solved by drawing from random parts of Sonic Heroes. By that, I mean skins you can use in multiplayer mode from a cheat code became a 20-issue arc about a zombie apocalypse where several main characters were sacrificed. I hope you like Sonic Heroes. The Metal Virus showed that the comic can balance multiple tones, where it pushes the characters to their limits and has high emotional stakes that are surrounded by lively visuals and lighter dialogue. Restrictions aside, IDW Sonic gets a little deeper and darker than the games while still working within their framework, and I think that's a good approach to take with a new interpretation. I'd love it if the new cartoon took place in the same continuity as the games, which even this comic isn't, despite really wanting to be. Come on, Sega, make this obscure SpongeBob reference canon. It's hard to talk about how a 3D cartoon can take after a 2D comic, but I like to think of the book as being akin to detailed storyboards, where each artist approaches the characters a little differently. If the cast could miraculously look as good as Sonic does in Ralph Breaks the Internet, I'd be satisfied. But design-wise, I'd kinda want something like Tyson Hesse's redesign of Movie Sonic, where there's small aspects that resemble how he draws the Blue Hedgehog. For IDW, there's been about a dozen different interior artists, and some have more versatility or experience than others. The two standouts are Adam Bryce Thomas and Evan Stanley. Both of their stuff is very expressive and detailed, but veer off into either nuanced emotions and hard-hitting action, or dynamic and animalistic cartooniness. They're some of my ideal art styles for Sonic, and if the models don't take after them and aren't stylized, I love to see 2D title cards, maybe by one of the cover artists. Just off of the regulars, I love Diana Skelly's loose sketchiness. This person, with a name I would completely butcher, has consistently great lineless art and breathtaking colors, and John Gray tries to shove literally everything into one piece. He's extremely talented, and I'm very curious what his sleep schedule is like. I love how many covers there are, but also I hate how many covers there are. Take it from me, don't collect every variant unless you have the disposable income and a reliable subscription. The retail incentives are really hard to track down, and others aren't even worth the $4 America bucks. Looking at you, covers that are just repurposed model sheets. Sonic comic veteran Ian Flynn was behind the first 32 main issues, and he really knows the characters in and out. The cast is snarky but not overbearing, and their personalities are big but always layered. Most of the time, they don't fall into stereotypes, and that's helped by dividing them into different teams that allow their skills to stand out. I think any writer approaching this franchise could learn from reading the Team Sonic Racing one-shot. It puts accuracy to the games above all else, so everyone's an exposition or catchphrase machine. However, the writer behind this came back for the newest annual issue, and actually did a great quick story. Coincidentally, it had very little dialogue. Characters with built-in backstories and pre-planned arcs like Whisper and Dr. Starline are standouts, though not ideal for other mediums. The likes of Tangle or Rough and Tumble could easily slide into any new continuity as an audience surrogate, or goons on the level of Bebop and Rocksteady from Ninja Turtles. It's also good to have citizen characters on the sidelines to diversify the roster, like Jewel the Beetle, or these underrated radio station employees, Night the Owl and Dawn the Rooster. I really hope these two show up again. The only character I'm not a fan of here is Shadow the Hedgehog. He's arrogant, stubborn, and often in the wrong. The guy is called up by others and realizes his mistakes, but it feels like an oversimplification of his character. Although, the writers have called Shadow hard to write for specifically, so Sega guidelines are likely to blame here. Sonic is also a little different, being more forgiving and open to redemption than usual. This compassionate take on him allows for thoughtful conflicts with Eggman right out of the gate, so I think this Sonic works in context. I think it would be neat if the Netflix cartoon cherry-picked memorable incarnations of the characters, or at least ones that fit the stories they want to tell. I never thought much of Vector or Jet or even Zavik, but they put them in the right situations to make them interesting. I wonder who will be the one to redeem Millen Ramada, Chris Thorndike's rival and Paris Hilton parody from the Sonic X comics, who you didn't know existed until this very moment. Please don't lie to yourself. The IDW comics have had a very unique approach to world building, which is none. Most issues have Sonic traveling to a new location, and the grand majority of those are generic villages, with maybe one defining trait. Many make multiple appearances, but I can barely tell them apart. Besides someone's house just happening to be there, most characters have no connection to these towns they save, and this problem is heightened in the Metal Virus saga. They bring in a few game locations, or places with different climates, but also introduce 3 more that I know nothing about in the span of 3 pages. I think this is a good example of what the 2022 show should try not to do. You don't have to backload the setting with lore, but use the iconic locations from Sonic's history to your advantage. Or focus the action on one central location, like Angel Island. That place kinda has it all motif-wise. And Knuckles. In its defense, I think the comic is currently fixing that problem by having smaller scale stories that are more character driven, especially in the latest arc and annual issue. It doesn't make or break my enjoyment, but I hope Sonic's world continues to be fleshed out in the future. Yes, that is what it's actually called. Since it's illegal for most Netflix shows to not be the slightest bit serialized, I actually think the chapter-based storytelling of IDW would fit that platform better than a monthly comic series. Rereading it all at once for this video showed that it's better when consumed in big chunks, since I think 20-page issues house roughly the same amount of content as 11-minute episodes. The early issues are fairly formulaic to ease in new readers, but the way that dialogue and action are sometimes isolated makes some of the fights feel overly simple. Luckily, that problem soon goes away, as once the overarching story gets going, the stakes are heightened and subplots with Dr. Eggman add variety. In between year-long events, there's cooldown issues that jump between various cast members recovering from the previous battle. I like how these are more slice-of-life oriented, and in a lengthier show, I'd ironically be up for having slower-paced stuff occasionally, just to show that the characters aren't always heroes 24/7. Speaking of pacing, my biggest gripe with these comics was how long the Metal Virus saga was dragged out for, to the point where it accidentally gained a political subtext when it wrapped up in 2020. It revolves around a virus made by Dr. Eggman that turns anyone who touches it into robot-like zombies, and Sonic has to prevent himself from getting fully infected while finding a cure, rescuing any survivors, and stopping the Deadly Six to save Sonic's world. Sonic's theme in a video game released 14 years ago was right. It really is his world. While there's many major developments and new elements, I still feel some issues could have been condensed or merged with others. Each infection matters, but they all play out slowly and similarly. It doesn't leave enough room for the last 8 issues to deliver an extensive climax and aftermath. For me, it still had plenty of stellar continuity and character moments, but overall, it was too elaborate of an idea for a mostly undeveloped universe. These issues are still solid and you shouldn't skip them, but this arc should have come later in the run. I think a cartoon could handle equally ambitious adventures. They just need to lay down the groundwork and naturally build up to that first. IDW's take on Sonic the Hedgehog isn't perfect. It can't take full advantage of the source material and spends a little too much time playing the long game. But on top of having a well-rounded roster and gorgeous art direction, it's one of the few products from this franchise that naturally appeals to fans of all kinds. Unless you only like Sonic characters when they're green, which happens more often than you'd think. As much as I'd love to see obscure characters from the franchise's past make a return, like the Freedom Fighters or the cast of OKKO, that's very unlikely given the restraints that this comic and other media have had to deal with. I'll try to keep an open mind when we learn more about what WildBrain and Man of Action have in store. However, they've already got a strong framework for inspiration or even adaptation in IDW Sonic. Hiring its biggest writers like Ian Flynn and Evan Stanley would be a good alternative, but I'd be alright with something new, as long as it's still fitting of the brand. This pitch for a Sonic animated series done by my friend and comic writer Daniel Barnes combines bits and pieces of older continuities with modern elements. It's very well done, and I recommend you give it a look. It kind of aims to be the definitive adaptation of this gaming icon, and I think that should be the end goal for any sort of reboot. Even if they do something strange like a spin-off of the new movie, whatever this Netflix project ends up being, it better be good enough to prevent journalists from saying that Sonic's cartoons had a rough transition to 3D. Journalists would also intentionally ignore something good from this franchise to make their point.